Maya moved through the airport with a kind of quiet confidence that made people turn their heads, even if they didn't know why. She wasn't loud or flashy, but there was something about her presence, steady, graceful, and focused. Her black heels clicked softly on the polished floor as she walked, her leather carry-on bag slung over her shoulder, her passport tucked neatly into her hand. This trip was not just another business flight. It was the start of something bigger. Only 2 years ago, Maya had been sitting in her tiny apartment, building her tech company from scratch on a second-hand laptop, staying up until sunrise, writing code and sending cold emails that no one answered. There were nights she cried from exhaustion, wondering if she had chosen an impossible path. But she never stopped. And now she was on her way to London to speak at a global tech summiton event filled with the world's top investors and more innovators. She had earned her seat on this flight in every possible way. The boarding gate buzzed with the soft chaos of travelers' families juggling kids, business people muttering into phones, couples rushing to not miss final calls. Maya stood among them with calm eyes, her mind replaying her pitch slides. She wasn't nervous, just determined. The work, the late nights, the failures that became lessons, all of it had brought her here. When the gate agent called for first class boarding, Maya stepped forward. Some people glanced at her with surprise, like they didn't expect someone her age or her color to be in the priority line. She noticed, but she didn't let it sink into her skin. She had seen those looks before. They had once stung like tiny knives, but now they only fueled her. Her boarding pass beeped with a clear chime as the scanner lit green. She smiled politely at the agent and walked down the jet bridge, the cold metal floor rattling softly beneath. Her shoes, the smell of jet fuel and recycled air, filled her nose, a smell she had come to associate with movement, growth, possibility. Inside the plane, the cabin lights glowed a warm gold. A flight attendant with a practiced smile welcomed her aboard. "Good evening," Maya replied with a soft smile, showing her seat assignment. She found her seat by the window in first class. The plush leather seemed to hug her as she sat down. It was more space than she needed, but it felt like a symbol, like the world was finally giving her room to stretch. She placed her carry-on neatly in the overhead bin, then slid her laptop out and set it gently on her lap. As other passengers shuffled in, she opened her laptop and skimmed her presentation slides. Rows of bright colors and bold text filled the screen. Market trends, revenue growth, the vision of her company. Every number on those slides had been fought for like oxygen. A small smile crept onto her face as she remembered her first investor meeting years ago, when an older man had glanced at her resume and said, "You don't look like a tech CEO." She hadn't replied then. She didn't need to. Now her company had 3 offices, dozens of employees, and a reputation that made people pay attention when she spoke. The plane continued to fill. Soft chatter floated through the cabin, the rustle of bags sliding into compartments, the hum of engines warming somewhere deep below. Maya stayed focused, her fingers gently tapping the keyboard, making quiet adjustments to her notes. She didn't know anyone else on this plane. She didn't need to. This flight wasn't about comfort or status, was about stepping into the place she had built for herself in the world. She had dreamed of this moment on countless sleepless nights. Now it was real, solid, hers. She leaned back, looking out the small oval window at the fading orange sky. The sun was dipping below the horizon, leaving streaks of pink across the clouds like brushstrokes on canvas. It felt like the world itself was painting her a message. Keep going. Her phone buzzed softly. A message from her assistant blinked on the screen. "Safe travels, boss. Proud of you." Maya smiled, her heart warm. She locked the phone and tucked it away. For a few quiet moments, she let herself breathe deeply, soaking in the stillness before the world demanded her brilliance again. The flight attendants moved through the aisle, offering drinks. Maya declined, politely, sipping from her water bottle instead. She wasn't here to relax. She was here to rise, somewhere deep inside her chest. Beneath the calm surface, a quiet fire burned one made of all the doors that had been closed in her face. All the voices that had told her she didn't belong. All the times she had walked into rooms where no one looked like her and stayed anyway. And now, she was flying toward a room where the world would have no choice but to see her. The hum of the engines deepened. The seatbelt sign dinged overhead. Passengers settled into their places, tucking bags under seats and buckling belts. Maya checked her watch, then looked back at her laptop. In just a few hours, she would be across the ocean. In just a few days, her company's name would be on screens all over the world. She didn't know yet that her strength would be tested again before this flight ever left the ground. But for now, she simply sat there in her seat, calm, poised. I'll flee exactly where she belonged. The cabin was still buzzing softly as passengers continued boarding. The quiet shuffle of feet and the clink of luggage wheels echoing faintly. Maya stayed, focused on her screen, her posture straight and calm, like the world around her couldn't touch her concentration. She was reviewing the final graph on her pitch deck when a shadow fell over her. She looked up, expecting to see a flight attendant. Instead, an older white man stood in the aisle, staring down at her with a puzzled frown creasing his face. His silver hair was combed neatly, his expensive watch gleaming under the cabin lights. He carried himself with the easy confidence of someone used to being listened to. "That's my seat," he said flatly, pointing at the place where she sat. Maya blinked, unsure she had heard him right. "Excuse me? My seat," he repeated, louder this time, as if she might not understand plain English. "This is to a—" Maya kept her tone even. "Yes, it is. This is my seat." She reached calmly for her boarding pass, tucked into the seat pocket, and held it up. "To A." The man barely glanced at it. "No, there's obviously a mistake," he said, his voice rising a little. A couple of nearby passengers looked up. "You should be back there." He motioned vaguely toward the economy cabin behind the curtain, as if the air behind it belonged to her. Maya felt a familiar sting in her chest, a sharp, cold pinch she had known too many times before. But she didn't flinch. "There's no mistake," she said, her voice steady. "This is my assigned seat." The man laughed lightly, the kind of laugh that carried disbelief instead of humor. "Look, I fly this route all the time. I know how these things work. You probably misread your ticket." "I didn't," Maya said simply, her words quiet but firm. For a moment, they just stared at each other. The space between them thick with something unspoken but sharp. He shifted, his jaw tightening. "Fine," he said, shaking his head like he was being patient. "Let's just get the attendant. They'll clear this up." He waved to the front, snapping his fingers slightly. A young flight attendant hurried over, her smile tight with practiced professionalism. "Is everything okay here?" she asked. "Yes," Maya said. "No," the man cut in at the same time. "She's in my seat." The attendant looked from him to Maya, her polite mask flickering for just a second. "Can I see your boarding passes, please?" Maya handed hers over without hesitation. The attendant scanned it quickly. "Seat 2A, she said with a nod, then turned to the man. "And yours, sir." The man pulled his crumpled ticket from his blazer pocket, thrusting it at her like proof of victory. She scanned it and paused. Her brows lifted slightly. "Sir," she said carefully, "your boarding pass says seat 1 for C." "That's not right," he snapped. "I was supposed to be upgraded. I always get upgraded." "I'm afraid 14C is the seat listed here," the attendant replied, her voice calm but firmer now. "2A is assigned to this passenger." Maya stayed silent, her eyes steady, her breathing slow and even. The man's face flushed slightly red. He laughed again, this time sharper, without warmth. "This is ridiculous," he muttered. He looked at Maya again, his tone shifting to something halfway between disbelief and irritation. "You're telling me you bought this seat?" "Yes," Maya said, her voice still calm, still steady. "I did." Around them, the cabin had gone quieter. A few passengers nearby were pretending not to watch while clearly listening to every word. The man straightened up, puffing his chest a little. "This is absurd. I've been flying this airline for 30 years. They know me." The flight attendant held her ground. "Sir, please take your assigned seat so we can continue boarding." "I'm not moving," he said. The words landed in the air like a dropped weight. The tension thickened instantly. Maya felt her heart thud once. Solid and deep, but she didn't show it. She closed her laptop gently, set it aside on the tray, and folded her hands in her lap. Her posture stayed calm, almost serene, though her mind was alert like steel. She had dealt with boardrooms full of dismissive men. She had faced rejection, so sharp it felt like glass. She knew how to stand her ground without raising her voice, but she also knew this moment could turn quickly. The man's tone had shifted from disbelief to entitlement, and now it hovered near anger. His eyes darted toward the passengers watching. He didn't like being challenged, especially not by someone like her. Maya caught the eyes of the attendant, who looked torn between politeness and procedure. The young woman gave her a small, apologetic look before speaking softly into her radio. "Supervisor 2, first class." She murmured. Maya stayed still. She would not shrink. She would not move from the seat she had rightfully earned. Somewhere deep inside her, that same quiet fire that had carried her through years of obstacles flared a little higher. This man thought he could push her out of her place, simply because he believed she didn't belong here. But she did belong, and she wasn't going anywhere. Asterisk. The air inside the cabin seemed to change. What had been a soft hum of quiet chatter now carried a thin thread of tension that curled through the rows like invisible smoke. Passengers shifted in their seats, pretending to scroll through their phones while their eyes flicked up again and again toward the standoff in 2A. Maya could feel all of it, the eyes, the silence, the weight of their curiosity pressing in on her. But she stayed perfectly still. Her hands rested lightly on her lap, her posture calm and upright, like a mountain unmoved by a storm. She had learned long ago that stillness could be more powerful than shouting. The older man stood solid in the aisle, his arms crossed, refusing to move. His jaw was set tight, his silver hair perfectly in place, even as a thin flush crept up his neck. He was breathing harder now, small puffs through his nose, like someone holding in anger. The flight attendant who had spoken to them earlier hovered a few rows away, her voice low as she spoke into her radio. Maya caught small fragments of her words, refusing, "Won't sit. Supervisor coming." The man suddenly spoke again, louder now. "This is unbelievable," he barked, startling the nearby passengers. "I should not have to deal with this kind of incompetence." His voice carried down the cabin, and a ripple of uncomfortable movement spread through the rows. People looked at each other, then quickly looked away. Maya didn't move. "This is my seat," he said again, his tone slicing through the quiet. "I was supposed to be upgraded. I always am. I'm a platinum member. You are assigned one for C, sir," the attendant said again carefully, standing a bit straighter this time. "Please take your seat so we can depart on time." "Not sitting in coach," he snapped. "Do you have any idea who I am?" That sentence, so familiar and heavy with arrogance, floated through the air like a sour smell. Maya almost smiled, not because it was funny, but because she had heard the same words in boardrooms, in meetings, in business deals where men thought titles were crowns. He thought this was about status. He didn't see that it was about dignity. Then, the cabin supervisor arrived. She was taller, older, and carried herself with quiet authority. She moved down the aisle briskly, her dark navy blazer sharp and pressed, her ID badge glinting under the lights. She stopped in front of the man, her eyes calm but steady, the kind of gaze that made people straighten up without realizing. "Sir," she said smoothly, "what seems to be the issue?" "This woman is in my seat," the man said, gesturing at Maya like pointing at a problem on a wall. "I always get upgraded, and they've clearly made a mistake." The supervisor looked at Maya. "May I see your boarding pass?" Maya handed it to her silently. The supervisor scanned it quickly. "Seat 2A, she confirmed, then turned to the man. "And yours, sir?" He handed his over, tight-lipped. She read it carefully, then nodded. "One for C." "That's wrong," he said sharply. "They promised me an upgrade." "Even if an upgrade is possible," she replied evenly, "it must be confirmed and processed by the system. There's no record of that here." "I'm not sitting in the back," he said again, his voice now sharp enough to make the woman in the row behind Maya flinch. "And I'm not moving until this is fixed." The supervisor's eyes hardened slightly. "Sir, if you continue to refuse to take your assigned seat, we will be unable to depart on time. This will cause a delay for everyone on board." "That's not my problem," he said, his lips curling. "Move her?" That word "her" hit Maya like a stone. He didn't say her name. He didn't even say "this passenger." Said "her," as if she were not a person, but an obstacle. Maya inhaled slowly through her nose. Her chest rose gently, then fell. She did not speak. She did not give him the satisfaction of reacting. The supervisor's expression shifted from calm to cold professionalism. She took a step closer to him. "Sir," she said. Voice lower now, but full of authority. "This passenger is in her correct assigned seat. If you refuse to comply with the safety instructions of the crew, you may be removed from this flight." The man stared at her. A muscle in his cheek twitched. "I paid good money for this," he muttered. "And so did she," the supervisor said softly. Those words struck like a hammer in the quiet cabin. A few nearby passengers blinked. The man's mouth opened, then closed again. His face had gone a deeper shade of red. He looked around quickly, realizing that nearly everyone nearby was watching now. He seemed to shrink just a little under their silent stares, but pride still burned in his eyes. Maya didn't break her gaze. She watched him with the quiet patience of someone who had nothing to prove. Because she didn't. She had already proven enough simply by being here. The supervisor straightened. "Sir, you have two choices," she said clearly. "Take your assigned seat, or we will ask you to deplane." He didn't move. He didn't speak. His jaw worked silently, like he was chewing on all the words he wanted to say, but knew he couldn't. Seconds stretched. The plane stayed still. The air felt tight, and Maya thought, for the first time, that this might not end peacefully. The cabin had gone quiet in that strange, heavy way that happens when people are pretending not to watch, but everyone is watching. Even the soft music playing from the speakers seemed to fade beneath the silence. Maya sat motionless, her hands folded in her lap, her calmness becoming its own kind of power. The man still stood in the aisle, clutching his carry-on tightly by the handle, as though the leather bag could somehow prove his importance. His face was still flushed, and tiny beads of sweat had begun to collect along his temple. The supervisor stood between them now, her posture tall, her tone professional but no longer soft. "Sir," she said again, "this is your final warning. Please take your assigned seat." "No," he said sharply, the word cutting through the air like glass. "I'm not moving." This is supposed to be my seat." Passengers glanced at each other nervously. Someone in the back row coughed. A woman a few rows behind Maya whispered something to her partner and shook her head. "This is ridiculous." The man continued, louder now, his voice trembling slightly, not from fear but from pride twisting into frustration. "You can't expect me to sit back there while you give my seat to—" He stopped himself, but the unfinished word hung in the air like smoke, dark and ugly. Everyone understood what he meant. Maya felt it settle around her like a cold shadow. But she didn't flinch. She had faced uglier words. She had heard worse whispered behind closed doors when people thought she couldn't hear. And she had survived them all. The supervisor's eyes sharpened. "Sir," she said firmly, "this is not optional. You continue to refuse, you will be removed from this aircraft." He let out a dry laugh. "Remove me? You wouldn't dare." At that moment, a new voice joined the tense circle. "Sir," said the captain. The cockpit door had opened, and the pilot himself stood there now. Tall, broad-shouldered, wearing his crisp uniform-like armor. His presence alone seemed to shift. The air of the cabin seemed to draw in a collective breath. The man turned quickly, startled. "Captain Good," he said, as if rescue had arrived. "There's been a mistake. They've given my seat to this woman, and I've been flying this airline for 30 years. "Aye, sir," the captain interrupted quietly, but his voice carried the calm force of someone used to command. "I've been informed of the situation. There's been no mistake. This passenger is in her correct assigned seat." The man's mouth opened, but the captain kept speaking before he could argue. "You are delaying this flight. We are now past our scheduled departure time because you are refusing to comply with crew instructions." "I'm not sitting in coach," the man said stubbornly. His voice had grown louder again, tinged with desperation. "I paid for you, paid for one for C," the captain said simply. "That is your seat." There was a pause. The captain's eyes were steady, unblinking. Around them, the cabin was silent, as if the entire aircraft were holding still, waiting. The man shifted, his jaw clenched. Then something inside him snapped. "This is unbelievable," he shouted suddenly, his voice cracking. "I'm not sitting." Behind her, the word burst out of him like a shot. Several passengers gasped quietly. Someone muttered, "Wow," under their breath. Maya didn't move. She didn't speak. She simply watched him, her eyes calm but unyielding. The captain's expression hardened like steel. He gave a single nod to the supervisor. "Ground it," he said quietly. And just like that, everything changed. The supervisor spoke swiftly into her radio. "Gate security requested. Passenger removal. Aircraft on hold." A ripple of whispers spread through the cabin. People were pulling out their phones now, recording, their screens glowing like small blue moons in the dim light. "What? No, you can't do that," the man sputtered, the confidence in his voice suddenly fraying. "You can't this flight. Can't leave without me." "It will," the captain said simply. "But not until you're off it." The man froze, stunned. The color drained slightly from his face as the weight of what was happening settled over him. This wasn't just an argument anymore. It was real. He turned to the passengers around him as if looking for support, but all he saw were cold, silent stares. No one spoke. No one defended him. Even those who had been quietly curious now looked away, unwilling to be on his side. 2 airport security officers entered the cabin then, moving with quiet efficiency. They approached the man slowly, one of them speaking softly, explaining that he had to come with them. "No," he said weakly. "No, this is a misunderstanding." "It isn't," the supervisor replied calmly. "Please gather your belongings." He didn't move at first. His pride still clung to him like armor, but it was cracking now, falling away in small, invisible pieces. Finally, with shaking hands, he reached up and pulled his bag from the overhead bin. The cabin stayed utterly silent as he walked down the aisle, escorted by security. No one said a word. No one clapped. No one smiled. They only watched as he disappeared through the door, the echo of his shoes fading down the jet bridge. The door closed. The captain exhaled softly, then turned to the passengers. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said into the cabin microphone, "will be delayed for a few minutes as ground control resets our clearance. Thank you for your patience." And then he disappeared back into the cockpit. Maya sat quietly in 2A, her gaze steady, her heart beating slower now. The tension that had wrapped itself around her chest slowly loosened. She had not moved. She had not shouted. She had not begged. She had simply stayed where she belonged. And now the entire flight knew it. The door sealed with a soft hiss. And for a long moment afterward, the cabin felt weightless quiet in a way that wasn't calm yet, just stunned. Everyone was still wrapped in the echo of what had just happened. The seats, the overhead bins, even the dim golden light from the cabin ceiling seemed frozen in time, like the plane itself was holding its breath. Maya sat very still. She could feel her pulse in her fingertips, steady but strong. Her reflection wavered faintly in the small oval window beside her. It looked calm, controlled, even serene, but inside, waves of thought and emotion were colliding silently. She hadn't said much. She hadn't needed to. But everything about the way the man had looked at her, spoken to her. Dismissed hurt had stirred memories she had buried deep. Moments when she had been told she didn't belong in boardrooms, on stages, in corner offices. She had fought through all of them quietly, but they had left marks. Now, the same quiet strength had carried her through again. And everyone had seen it. A flight attendant gently touched her shoulder, leaning close. "Would you like some water?" she asked softly. "Yes," Maya said, her voice low. It felt like speaking after holding her breath for hours. The attendant returned a moment later with a bottle of cold water, setting it gently on Maya's tray with a look that wasn't just polite, it was respectful. Real, quiet respect. Their eyes met for half a second, and the attendant gave her the smallest nod before moving on. Around the cabin, the mood began to shift. The tension that had coiled like wire was loosening now, replaced by something warmer, almost protective. A woman a row across leaned slightly toward Maya. "That was something," she said softly. "You handled that with so much grace." Maya offered a small smile. "Thank you." The woman smiled back, then sat upright again, like she didn't want to intrude, but her expression carried admiration. Across the aisle, a young man raised his eyebrows and mouthed silently, "Respect," giving a subtle thumbs up before turning back to his headphones. Maya didn't respond outwardly. But inside, something glowed faintly, something soft and rare. She wasn't used to strangers seeing her fight. She was used to winning battles quietly behind closed doors, and then simply presenting the victory. This was different. This had been public, and for the first time. It felt like maybe people had seen her, and not just the argument. The plane began to move again, slowly backing away from the gate. The engines hummed to life, low and steady, like the sound of something powerful waking up. The captain's voice came over the speakers, calm and composed as ever. "Thank you for your patience, folks. We've been cleared for departure." Few passengers clapped softly, just a few, scattered and small, but it made the tension crack at last. Others chuckled quietly. The laughter wasn't mocking. It was relief. The pressure had broken. Maya opened her laptop again, not to work, but just to keep her hands busy. The familiar glow of the screen steadied her, gave her something normal to hold on to. But her thoughts kept drifting not to the man, but to the feeling of having stayed seated, rooted like a tree, even as he tried to uproot her with words. Somewhere behind her, a voice spoke quietly. "Do you think they'll let him fly again?" "I doubt it," another whispered. "They might ban him." The words floated forward like whispers of justice, soft but satisfying. As the plane began its slow taxi down the runway, Maya let her head rest gently against the seat. She stared out the window at the blue line of the horizon. The sunlight slid across the glass and danced over her face. She thought about how she had started our company in a single-room apartment with nothing but a second-hand laptop and relentless hope. She thought about all the nights she had worked while the city slept, all the meetings where she had walked in as the only woman, the only black face, the youngest in the room, and still taken her seat at the table. She thought about how much it had cost her to be here, how much it had been worth it. The plane gathered speed, the engines rising to a roar, the ground shuddering beneath them. Maya closed her eyes for a moment, feeling the weight press her back into the seat as the aircraft surged forward. Then, with a smooth, powerful lift, they rose into the sky. The city shrank below, the clouds opened wide, and sunlight poured through the windows like gold. And for the first time since the confrontation, Maya smiled fully, not because she had won, but because she had simply stayed where she belonged, and no one could move her anymore. The plane leveled high above the clouds, gliding smooth and quiet like it had slipped into another world. Outside the window, sunlight glimmered across a sea of white, endless and soft, like drifting over pieces of heaven. Inside the cabin, the tense energy that had filled the air earlier had thinned into something gentler, quieter, but not empty. It was charged, like the soft hum after a lightning strike. Maya felt it. She didn't look up much, but she could feel eyes still landing on her from time to time. They weren't sharp now. They weren't hostile or questioning. They were different, curious, cautious, almost reverent. The same passengers who had watched silently while the man confronted her were now glancing at her with a strange mix of guilt and admiration, as if they were seeing her for the first time and didn't know how to make up for what they hadn't done. The flight attendants moved down the aisle with carts, their voices soft and careful, but when they reached Maya, their tone changed warmer, almost protective. "Would you like a meal, Ms. Brooks?" One of them asked gently, using her last name from the passenger manifest. "Compliments of the captain." Maya blinked. She hadn't been expecting that. "That's kind of you," she said quietly. "Thank you." The attendant smiled softly before moving on, and Maya could feel the subtle shift ripple outward, like a small stone dropped into still water. People saw the crew treating her with a different kind of respect, and something inside the cabin recalibrated. It was as if invisible lines were being redrawn. A man 2 rows ahead, someone who had kept his head buried in his laptop the whole time, suddenly turned in his seat. "Excuse me," he said softly. "I just want to say you handled that situation incredibly well." Maya gave him a polite smile. "Thank you." He nodded awkwardly, then turned back around, but his posture was straighter now, almost as straight, though he felt proud just to have spoken to her. Another passenger, a younger woman in her 20s, leaned over the aisle when the seatbelt sign went off. Her eyes were bright and nervous, like she wasn't sure if she was allowed to speak. I just wanted you to know," she said. "Seeing you not back down, it meant something, really." For a moment, Maya didn't know what to say. She wasn't used to strangers attaching meaning to her quietness, to her calm resistance. She usually fought her battles unseen. "Thank you," she said finally, and meant it. The young woman smiled wide, her shoulders relaxing as if she'd been holding her breath since the gate, then slipped back into her seat. Maya sat back against the headrest, closing her eyes for a moment. The engines thrummed like a deep heartbeat beneath her feet. She thought about how strange it was that silence could change things more than shouting ever could. She had done nothing more than stay seated, but somehow, that small act was rearranging the energy of an entire cabin full of strangers. She opened her laptop, not to work, but to distract herself. But as soon as she did, a soft chime sounded on her phone. She glanced at the screen and paused. Her name was trending. Somehow, in the short time since takeoff, snippets of what had happened had already reached the internet. Someone had recorded the confrontation. The video had gone viral while they were still in the air. The headline read, "Black CEO refuses to be moved from first-class seat, plane grounded after passengers outburst." Maya stared at the screen, caught between disbelief and quiet dread.